Thanks for being with us here on Good Karma Wrestling, along with Brian Rowitz from ESPN West Palm. I'm Jonathan Hood from ESPN Chicago. And Brian, you know my birthday is September 7th. Is my birthday today?
It's an early one today. A big guest to bring smiles to everyone's faces.
It must be my birthday because we have Willow Nightingale on the show for the first time on Good Karma Wrestling as AEW comes to the Wintrust Arena in Chicago July 3rd. Get your tickets at allelitewrestling.com or at the box office at Wintrust Arena. Willow joins us here on Good Karma Wrestling. Willow, Jonathan, and Brian, thanks so much for your time.
I am very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. How are we all doing? It seems like we're in good spirits.
Of course.
Yes, it's Good Karma Wrestling. Of course we're in good spirits. Of course it is. So how's life for you right now? How's life, Willow?
Pretty good. I mean, we just had Forbidden Door in my hometown of Long Island, and I got to team with Tam Nakano, which was great because about like a month ago, I was her opponent. I wrestled her, really hard-hitting. I was fortunate to win that match, pulled through all my heart, all my power. And I knew when Forbidden Door was coming around, and I was challenged to find a partner from Stardom who I trusted and I would think would have my back. I was like, Tam's exactly the person. We're both cute. We're both really strong. We're both amazing wrestlers. Not to like put myself over too much, but so it was like perfect fit. And I was right. We picked up the win. She did have my back. I feel like we walked away being like, we're friends. We have like a relationship moving forward. I'll check in on her. And I had like 18 people at UBS supporting me because it was my hometown. So I'm like feeling super great walking into Dynamite this week as I face Chris Statlander. Yeah, that's it. I'm feeling good about it.
When you have moments like that in your hometown, wrestling in Japan, everything you've accomplished in less than a decade of pro wrestling, how often do you step back and realize what you've been able to do in such a short amount of time?
It's weird because it doesn't feel like a short amount of time. Like I've been wrestling for the majority of my adult life. I started when I was 20 years old. And it really wasn't until I was about like 27, 28 that it felt like things were happening. But the saying, it's like an overnight success doesn't happen overnight. But the past 2.5 years or so have been like very overwhelming because things have been happening. Like I'm here, I'm there. And like really last year, I think when I first wrestled Mercedes in at New Japan for Resurgence, that was like a big turning point for my career because making it to AEW was a huge step. But that really like switched gears for me. I think people started looking at me as like a main player in women's wrestling. And I'm grateful for that. But that is not without a bunch of like hard work,
Sure.
Long drives, a lot of time, a lot of pain that made it possible. So I'm grateful for everyone for opening their eyes and paying attention. But also like I know I put a lot of work into it. So when I sit down and think about it, it's just very like gratifying,
Yeah.
Willow, we've seen some of your family members on television, and I'm very curious of where you get your personality from, because it's palpable through the television. When you smile and even in your promos, your personality and your kindness comes through more so than just the wrestling baby face. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll put my folks over time and time again because I really lucked out with like the family lottery. Like my dad is so like chill and laid back, but always like a very positive guy. He's like in his late 50s. He'll like walk around on his hands doing cartwheels, doing handstands for people, entertaining all his friends. He used to do a bunch of bike tours when we were kids. He did capoeira. And then, so there's like some natural athletic ability from him. My mother, also very positive, like loving, look on the bright side kind of person. But she will tell you herself, like, if you cross her, she will be a bitch, which I don't know if I can say that word.
You can say that.
Yes.
You're good.
Yes.
She's like, I'm a bitch when I'm ready to be. And so I think that bit from her really like comes through into wrestling in terms of like my combativeness, my aggression. But also she has this like magnetism to her that just like if you take her out to a club or like a bar, like people will just start talking to her and she'll be like, "Oh, have you met my friend? We met an hour ago, but now we're good pals." Um, so really all of that together, and she was also like a sprinter. She's from Guyana. She was like a very highly rewarded sprinter when she did that back in the day. But both of them, lovely, positive people, naturally athletic. Um, but you don't want to mess with them. So all of those handed down to me made some weird mumbo gumbo stew that is Willow Nightingale. It's as much nurture as it is nature.
Speaking of family, you tweeted how excited your mom was to see the main event of Forbidden Door. Was she more excited to see Swerve versus Ospreay or to see your match on Sunday?
I don't know. That's a great question. I think obviously there's investment
Sure.
beyond who wins and lose in my wrestling match, because if I, God forbid, knock on wood, if I get hurt or something makes me unhappy, like she has to deal with that personally. But she was never really a wrestling fan growing up, but through seeing like Swerve, Orange Cassidy, Will, like she got to meet him in and see him wrestle for the first time at Dynasty in St. Louis. And ever since then, like, those are her boys. She's like, "Are they on the show? Are they wrestling? Like, what's going on?" So we were on the phone. She was like, "Are any of my boys in the show?" I was like, "Well, Orange Cassidy has a match. Leah Rush is actually somebody too that I've known since like we both first started in Marvelous. And the first time she saw him wrestle, she was hooked. But then she was like, "What about Will?" I was like, "Will's wrestling Swerve." She goes, and like shrieked through the phone. She goes, "I get to see both of them wrestle each other," and she was freaking out. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of how everyone feels.
Yeah. We're in that boat also. Don't worry. She's not alone there.
Yeah.
Yes. We are all screaming when we see AEW wrestling. So it is AEW Dynamite taking place July 3rd at the Wintrust Arena. AllEliteWrestling.com is where you go, or Wintrust Arena. And of course, Dynamite on TBS every Wednesday at 7 o'clock Central Time. You mentioned talking about facing Mercedes Mone. What was the game plan going into taking on Mercedes? Because you two have two different styles.
This is true. So the first time I had wrestled her, I had a bunch of tape on her. I had been a fan for such a long time. I already kind of knew what to expect coming from her. And once she started that New Japan run, I think you got to even see another side and like another layer of what she's capable of. And so I was able to use that to my advantage the first time I wrestled her. And like, of course, she did get hurt. And, I'm a competitor at the end of the day. I'm going to use that to my advantage as well. But going into this match, I don't know. She hadn't wrestled for a year. I wasn't sure what her training had really been like going into everything, if she had like switched it up. But I did have the confidence in knowing like I had beaten her before, so I know it's possible and I can do it again. Ultimately, she's one of the best for a reason. Didn't work out in my favor. I wish her the best, but right now I'm in the Owen Hart Cup. I'm in the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. I'm looking to win that so that I can face Toni Storm for the Women's World Championship. One thing doesn't work out, you got to pivot and then find what the next direction is. And for me, that's where I'm at right now.
You mentioned being a fan. Who were some of the wrestlers when you were coming up that you look at and say, okay, one day that's who I want to be like in the ring?
Oh, I don't really know that when I was growing up, I saw anybody like that.
Okay.
Like, I was a big fan of Trish and Lita. I loved Victoria. A few years later, I became like a huge fan of like Beth Phoenix, which is, again, also a huge like Adam Copeland fan.
Yeah.
And like knowing like, oh, this is very cool. So like those were who I saw on TV growing up, but it really wasn't until I was in like late high school, college time, where I used to be on tumblr.com. I used to blog on there.
Yeah.
And that's when I like started getting into like 90s women's Japanese wrestling. And I saw like Manami Toyota, and like specifically for me, I've always been a bigger girl. So like seeing Aja Kong and Bull Nakano wrestle, I was like, I can do this. This is so cool. So they were huge inspirations for me. Sarah Del Rey. The first time I saw her wrestle, I was like, great. Like, her thing is like wrestling first.
Right.
And that, like, those two, like, worlds of like understanding the 2000s independent wrestling scene and what women were bringing there, and like Joshi wrestling being introduced to that, like really in my head was like, okay, maybe there is a place for me, because I never saw myself on TV, and when I was a kid, that's all I knew of wrestling. I didn't see myself there, but I found a place for me to succeed and just kept pulling that thread for 6, 7 years until it manifested in me being here with you now.
Look at that.
There's so much going on and so much discourse about AEW and the behind the scenes and in front of the camera. What does the wrestling media and fans have wrong about AEW, Willow?
I mean, there's not to be like, you're all wrong. You're all just yapping on Twitter and stuff. But like, I really do think there is a lot of people who will pull the most negative out of a situation or constantly just try to sensationalize things, because that's what gets attention. And of course, that's what's going to get like views and likes and clicks or whatever. So people are going to run with that and make it sound as crazy as possible. But I think morale is pretty good. I feel like there are some really awesome people in the locker room. With the past, like in the past year, we've gotten Will, we've got Okada, we've got Mercedes, these really big signings. And already, even before they came in, a super, super solid roster of just like the best wrestlers. You know, they say AEW, we're the best wrestler. Like that is so true. And I think if that should be the focal point. I don't think people should really be putting stock into whatever is going on backstage. I think we're getting along fine, but like it's a wrestling show for people to watch. Like what we put on the screen is ultimately the most important. So tune in Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays to see that.
What we see on the screen is that positivity. It's that smile. You have it in your bio. Nothing matters. Smile anyway. How do you live that life? How are you able to keep that smile on your face all the time?
Oh God, it is sometimes very hard, but okay. I think if I didn't, I would let all of the negativity consume me, and it's really easy to let that happen. But like I said, I have a great family who nurtured me to be a loving person, and we all support on each other. We like all lean on each other and support one another. So I know I'm lucky that like if I'm going through a tough time, I have friends I can talk to, my parents I'm very close to, my siblings. So those are people who continue to lift me up. But even sometimes, like, you're alone in a hotel room, you don't want to bug people. I have to look around and realize I'm a very privileged person. Wrestling is, yeah, it's hard work and it's the grind and it's what you put into it. But some of it, like at the end of the day, is luck. And I would never discredit myself or cut myself short on what I've done to get here, but like I'm lucky, I'm blessed to be here. And at the end of the day, when I'm upset and things might not be going my way, or I feel like I don't know, I'm lucky to be where I am. And even before I got here, you know, I had a car I could drive in. I had somebody who checked in on me that day and was like, "Hey, are you okay?" Even when I wasn't here. So there's always something to be grateful for, and that goes for all of you.
Willow Nightingale with us here on Good Karma Wrestling. July 3rd, it'll be AEW Dynamite emanating from the Wintrust Arena in Chicago. Brian, I would say the home of AEW Chicago, but that's just me as a Chicagoan. AllEliteWrestling.com, and of course at the Wintrust Arena box office. Listen, we know the story. It's not right what Stokley and Chris Statlander did, because you all were homies and it was great to watch, and now you guys are not together anymore. But I do have to ask about Stokley Hathaway. What is he like?
I mean, you guys see it. You see it on the screen. You know exactly what he's like. He is somebody who does not hold himself accountable to his own actions. He says ridiculous things about people and is a coward who will hide behind his keyboard when it comes time to a fight. I mean, I could say a lot of things about Statlander and her character, but she is extremely strong. She's a great fighter. All of that is still true, whether she's my friend or not. And so to have somebody like that to hide behind, he's a lucky man. But but you can only hide for so long behind her. I'm mad at Stat, but I'm very mad at Stokley as well.
When it comes to your career, you've accomplished so much in the ring, but what does it mean to you when you talk about how you remember being young, seeing someone in the ring like, hey, that could be me, knowing that you have that influence now, like seeing the way people react to you? What does that mean to you?
You know, like people really first started coming to me with this question, I guess about the time I got signed at AW about 2 years ago. And I had this big realization that when I started wrestling, I didn't set out to be a role model for anyone. I didn't set out to be like representation for, you know, people who are unconventional in like the way they look or behave or anything like that. But people really have resonated with me for many reasons, but that being one.
Sure.
And that is one of the things that keeps driving me forward when I feel like things are too hard or too tough or there's too much stress, is like there are a lot of people who are counting on me, not just because like they like me and they want to see me personally succeed, but like when have we really seen somebody who defies the norms of like the angry Black woman? I'm somebody who's out here showing you Black joy. When have we seen plus size, bigger women really being shown not just as like a monster, but as somebody who is athletic, can be powerful, and like sometimes, I mean, I'm not the speediest, but you know, I got a little agility to me. And so I feel like there is something about breaking down stereotypes and showing people like there's so much that an individual can be more than what you see at face value. And I just feel like I have to keep upholding that, keep breaking down those stereotypes. It's not an easy job to do. Somebody's got to do it. If you've got a bad thing to say about it, you know, water if a duck's back. I see what you all say on Twitter, but for the most part, people are very positive and supportive of me, and that is what matters.
Yeah, and it's a prideful joy you have in that. It sounds like, right?
Yes.
I mean, all the things that you mentioned, it sounds like you have a joy in that. You don't feel pressure in that regard.
I mean, a little bit, because, you know, if me, outside of like being a wrestling character, me myself, if I have a bad day, I'm not the kind of person who's gonna be like, you suck, and like take it out on other people. But if that did ever happen, I feel like there's a lot of little girls who could be let down. So I'm aware of that. But luckily, I just feel like Willow and the person who has to step into being Willow on Wednesdays aren't too far off. So that's why the pressure is manageable.
Let's talk about hashtag goals.
Sure.
So what else? What else would you like to accomplish?
Well,
because
like
you've already done so much. So
like I mentioned, I'm in the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. I did win that last year, but last year the stakes were not as high. I think like I won the tournament, and for me it was kind of more of like a statement. This year there are stakes of going to Wembley, which I did not get to do last year, which was a big chip on my shoulder for the second half of the year. So I want to go to Wembley. I want to wrestle for the Women's World Championship because I have not done that. And that is definitely a big goal of mine. And winning there would be, you know, beautiful. Dream moment, chef's kiss. That's the big one for me right now.
We're on board with that, right? I think we can speak for the show. We're on board with that.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, yes, absolutely.
I mean, they did also just announce at Forbidden Door the Wrestle Dynasty on in Japan in
January 5th. Yep.
That also seems like the kind of thing where it's like, I've mentioned it before. Our roster is stacked. We've got so many amazing, talented wrestlers who could take part in that. But there's like this big piece of me that's like, I got to be one of them though. Like, how do I make that happen? I was like the first woman who, while under AEW contract, was going to New Japan and going to CMLL representing our company. So for me, I'm like, I need to be there.
So Willow, our advice here at Good Karma Wrestling is for at the beginning of the year, just pack your bag and just go.
Yeah.
And then Tony's gonna be like, "Who's left here stateside? Where's Willow? Anybody here?" And you could just tell Tony, "Sorry, I'm already in Japan, so you don't have to book me."
Might as well book me. I'm here.
That's how you do that. He's gonna be looking around like, "Hey, is Willow stateside?" No.
No.
All right, don't say it out loud now, so he knows the plan. You know?
Okay.
We gotta think about it.
Kayfabe. I'm sorry. Kayfabe. July 3rd, again, All Elite Wrestling coming to the Wintrust Arena in Chicago. AllEliteWrestling.com for tickets. And, of course, you can watch Dynamite on TBS every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Willow, it is our pleasure. Thank you so much for giving us some time.
Thank you for chatting with me. I appreciate it.